Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're going to get things started. Welcome to MGFA's Wellness Series webinar, Nutrition and MG. My name is Jenna Mvalo, and I'm the Director of Patient Advocacy and Community Engagement at MGFA, and I'll be moderating today's session. We've got a great presentation ahead, but before we get started, I wanted to ask that you please remain on mute throughout the presentation and submit your questions via the Zoom chat located on the Zoom menu bar, and we'll answer them during the Q&A segment. Today's session will be recorded and available online. Now, I'd like to get started by giving a special thanks to our sponsors. Thank you to our presenting sponsors, Alexion, Argenix, Momenta, and UCB, and our supporting sponsor, Immunovant. We've got a great presentation ahead, and now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Govindarajan. He's a board-certified neurologist and neuromuscular doctor who studies and is an associate professor of neurology at the University of Missouri. He is a member of MGFA Medical and Scientific Board, a partner in MG Care, and serves as a PI on multiple clinical trials in MG and other neuromuscular diseases. And with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jenna, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I know it's the weekend, our weekend coming up, and I really appreciate your time with us. I will briefly talk about nutrition and myasthenia gravis. This is a topic that many of my patients commonly ask me, and I spend some time discussing about what to eat and what not to eat and how to eat with MG. And I will try to discuss some of those issues with all of you. I think we have a Q&A session at the end, so I'm happy to answer any questions about nutrition or MG otherwise. What's myasthenia gravis? You all know that myasthenia gravis is an autoimmune disease. It affects the neuromuscular junction. Basically, the nerve and the muscle, they don't attach each other. There is a gap between them, and that gap is called the neuromuscular junction. The nerve releases chemical called acetylcholine, which goes and binds to the muscle and causes the muscle to contract. In myasthenia gravis, you have a antibody, what we call an autoantibody, that binds to the receptors which are present on the muscle membrane and prevents the acetylcholine from binding to those receptors, which in turn causes muscle weakness. So the way nerve talks to the muscle is through this acetylcholine binding to those receptors on the muscle. And when you have myasthenia gravis, those receptors are blocked and muscles can't contract and you become weak. Myasthenia can affect various parts of your body. You can have weakness of your eyes, we get droopy eyes, double vision. You can have weakness of your arms and legs. You can get fatigue. Of course, you can have weakness of your breathing muscles. But a common problem I see with myasthenia is difficulty chewing, swallowing, and slurred speech, which can affect the food you eat, affect the amount of food you eat, affect the type of food you eat, and cause significant problems. So in the next few slides, I will try to discuss what are the nutritional issues that patients with MG face and what can we do to try to improve that. One of the things I want to talk, the way I want to discuss today is to classify it into two parts. First, talk about MG fatigue, including difficulty chewing and swallowing, and what can be done to improve nutritional intake when you have weakness in your chewing and talking muscles because of MG. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. Second, I want to talk about the side effects of two commonly used medication, pyridostigmine or mestinon and prednisone, which has significant impact on the nutritional intake. I would also like to briefly talk about, as I talk about these, about your pre-existing medical issues. Many of our MG patients don't just have MG, they can also have diabetes, they can have thyroid issues, all of which can affect the nutritional status. And I'll also talk as I go along about food desert that we are facing. I live in Columbia, Missouri, which is right in between Kansas and St. Louis. So if you like the Cardinals, you go to St. Louis. If you like the Royals, you go to Kansas. And if you are like me, you support the winning team, and you go either way. But jokes apart, there is a food desert in Midwest, and more so in mid-Missouri where I live, where it's very hard to get healthy food. I'm going to talk about healthy food, but it's really hard to get healthy food, and there's a big food desert. And I'll talk about gut health and an autoimmune diet at the end that I recommend my MG patients to be on. So, as you all know, MG can affect your chewing and swallowing. It's a part of MG. The chewing muscles have to constantly move, and if you have MG, after a while they become fatigued and you can't chew well. If you can't chew well and if you can't swallow well, there is a risk of choking and aspiration. In fact, I just admitted a patient last week who had aspirated, and we have, he's right now in the ICU getting antibiotics and all of those. So it's a common thing I see in my practice. Few things I recommend to my patients: sit upright when you eat and tilt your head forward. Allow gravity to do its work. If you're lean forward, and if you are on the side, or if you get distracted while swallowing, there's a chance that you may choke on the food or aspirate. So focus on what you are doing, chewing and swallowing. Sit upright, lean, tilt your head forward, and then swallow the food. Plan meals. This is the biggest part of MG. With MG, you have to plan your life, and the big part of that is planning and on when you want to eat. You want to eat when you are your strongest, and you know when you are your strongest. When my patients get newly diagnosed with MG, one of the things I tell them is to make a diary about when they eat, when they are strongest. So you eat when your muscles are the strongest, because you can chew well and swallow well at that time. If you eat when as the day goes on and you're fatigued, likely that you have hard time swallowing and aspirating. And eat small bites. You don't have to eat large bites. Take small bites. Rest in between. It's okay to when we were kids, we tell them don't watch TV and eat. So in case of MG, I tell them it's you take a couple of bites, relax, watch TV, and then take a couple of bites, relax, and watch TV. You don't have to gulp everything at once. We are in no hurry. When you're drinking water or any fluid, take small sips. Avoid long straws. If you have a long straw and you're trying to suck fluid, it's a big problem. Have the table at your level where you don't have to go all the way, reach out all the way and eat, or bend all the way to drink fluid. You have to have the table at your level so you can easily pick food and eat, and you don't have to bend all the way to drink water. The water is at your level. Take small sips of it. Use a broad straw, not a thin long straw which you can aspirate on. And I would always recommend having a good breakfast. Early morning when your strength is the best, you're taken your pyridostigmine, have a healthy large breakfast. As the day goes on, you become more fatigued, and avoid big meals later in the day. So that's commonly thing I tell my patients. Also, when you prepare food, you want to prepare tender foods that are easy to swallow. Avoid dry foods. And if you have dry foods, moisten them with gravy and liquid. I love gravy. I don't know how about you all. I love gravy. My wife complains about that I gain weight with it, but I like gravy. So, you can moisten with some amount of gravy. Thicken fluids if needed. And, you want to relax. Some people have music, some people watch TV. Don't get distracted. That's my answer. Whatever you do, focus on what you're eating. After you have chewed and swallowed, it's easy to focus on TV, but not while you are eating and swallowing. And eat warm rather than hot meals. When you have hot meals, it's really hard to swallow, and that's when you get into trouble. So warm meals are what I recommend, and you take your time while you're doing all these. Next slide. When chewing becomes harder, you replace fruit and veggies with juices or mashed veggies. You puree with yogurt and hot cereal. Um, Add mashed potatoes. Try scrambled eggs. Again, the idea is to eat something that has a uniform consistency. It's not too hard, not too liquidy, not too hot, not too cold. Everything in moderation. Now, in MG, M stands for moderation. So that's the way you want to keep it in MG. Dry fruits, as I said, avoid dry foods as much as possible. Um, Once in a while, a can of beer or a bottle of beer is fine, but really avoid beer if you're planning to eat, because alcohol can relax your muscles. Same thing with hard liquor; they can relax your muscle and cause problems. Tonic water is really good for cramps. I use tonic water when I get cramps sometimes, but tonic water can also relax your muscles too much and cause problems. Um, uh, and I always tell my patients, get your teeth checked regularly, especially if there are teeth which have dental caries and so on. Make sure that you get that fixed. By MG itself, you're having hard time chewing and swallowing. On top of that, if you have problems with dental caries, that adds to the problem. And some of the tips we always talk about is stewing and bracing and baking in the liquid until tender. So basically moist cooking, so it doesn't become dry and powdery. It becomes dry and powdery, that's when you have hard time swallowing, and that can cause pain in your food pipe as you're swallowing, and also put you at risk of aspiration. Steam or cook veggies until tender, and you have to be able to put your fork and be able to lift it. If it's too hard and you cannot easily put it, it's a problem. If it's too soft and it just breaks it, could be a problem as well. It just to be cooked enough so you can put and pick it up and eat. So it's a skill which you will learn with time. Corn is a problem. Crisp-fried veggies is a problem. Try to avoid them, risk of choking. Same thing with peaches and melon. The liquid portion of that can seep in and you are at risk of choking. Be very careful. Um, if you want to drink soup, make sure it has a thicker consistency. They are strained. They can have small pieces of meat in them. And if you are able to cook these consistencies and freeze them and then rewarm them. But when you rewarm, make sure you don't completely dehydrate it. So it becomes really hard and then you can't swallow. So the idea is not too hot, not too cold, not too hard, not too soft. Everything in moderation. That's the way MG works. And that's the way you have to think about your cooking as well. Next slide. Some other tips and tricks is to use some gravy or sauce. Let's say your food becomes really dry. You can ask me, hey, Dr. G, I did my food cooking. It's become really dry. I spent all this effort. I don't want to throw it away. Use some gravy or sauce to moisten it and make it softer. Milk or puree also works equally well. There are also commercial thickeners. I have tried some of these commercial thickeners. They are not good tasting. It's really hard to mix them with food and eat it. But if you have gotten used to the taste, I know that's an option as well. You can use potato flakes as well. Dry milk powder also is useful. Definitely avoid sticky foods again. Any candies, for example, it's a big problem. So avoid sticky foods. So to summarize, when you have MG, you want to plan your day. And in the last slide, I will give you an example of how to plan and live healthily with your MG. So you want to plan your day, you want to plan your meals, and you want to plan when you want to eat them. When you cook, you want to make sure you don't make it too dry or too soft. And when you are eating, make sure your table is set at your level. You don't have to bend over and reach all the way. You have to easily be able to pick up the food, sit straight, bend your head down to swallow. Take small bites, take your time to eat and swallow, don't get distracted. If you get tired, take rest and eat. We are in no hurry. So these are few things you have to keep in mind as you eat with MG. It's, we always tell that life is all about how you plan and how you live. With MG, it is even more important. It's how you plan your day or your week plays a big role on how well you can fight MG. That's about MG and the food, how to eat. In the next few slides, I will focus on some of the nutritional issues that come up with medications. The first one, of course, is pyridostigmine. As you all know, pyridostigmine or mestinon is a useful medication. It's not an immunosuppressive medication. It doesn't change the course of MG, but it provides symptomatic relief. I have patients who take it 3 times a day, 4 times a day, sometimes as much as 5 times a day. And it helps, it gives you benefit temporarily, helps you to do a lot of things. I have patients who plan their life around the pyridostigmine basically. So it is useful. But as you also know, one of the side effects of pyridostigmine is diarrhea. I want to make sure that, tell my patients that, if you're having side effects with pyridostigmine, there are ways to medications that can compensate for the diarrhea. And also you may want to cut down on the doses. But the other thing we can always do is change some of your dietary habits to reduce the amount of diarrhea you can have or abdominal cramps you can have with pyridostigmine. And a few things that I always tell my patients is to reduce greasy food, spicy food. Fiber is good, but if it's too much, it can cause problems. Coffee once in a while is okay, but again, caffeine can stimulate your bowel and cause diarrhea by itself. And if you add pyridostigmine to that mix, it's a big problem. You want to keep yourself hydrated if you're having diarrhea. Eat small, frequent meals. And yogurt is another thing that I commonly recommend. And we will have some more discussion on what kind of healthy autoimmune diet we can have. Once in a while you can use over-the-counter medications, but I would generally recommend against using them frequently because they themselves cause other complications. So if you are using pyridostigmine, it's helping you, well and good, stay on it. If it's causing diarrhea, there are a few things you can do, change your diet that might help you. Like avoid spicy food, avoid excess fiber, avoid greasy food, and limit your caffeine intake. Next slide. You are hearing about all the new clinical trials that are going on in MG. Some of you might be even participating in some of the clinical trials. So the MG field is entering a pretty exciting phase. We have so many new medications that are being tested, and some of them are coming into the treatment. That it's an exciting period to be a MG specialist. And of course, for our patients, it's a great time because we have all these treatment options. Having said that, steroids or prednisone still continue to be the mainstay of treatment in MG. I just diagnosed a patient a couple of weeks ago. He's in his 30s. I put him on prednisone. That was my treatment. I put him on prednisone. I put him on pyridostigmine. I said, if you have a flare-up, we will do IVIG or plasma exchange, depending upon how you do. And I'll see you back in a couple of weeks to see how you're doing. So despite all the treatments that are there, despite all the treatments that are up and coming, there is a consensus among many of the MG experts that steroids, basically prednisone, will continue to be the mainstay of treatment for most MG patients. And for most MG patients, it works pretty well. It controls the symptoms, but it's a double-edged sword. Like many things, steroids help with MG symptoms. It takes a couple of months, it does work after that. But after a while, steroids do start to cause side effects. The biggest side effect we see with steroids is weight gain, fluid retention, increase in sugar levels, including causing diabetes, increase in blood pressure, including causing hypertension. increasing the risk of osteoporosis and complications of osteoporosis. Some things I talk up to my patients when they're on steroids is to limit the amount of sodium that they take. And this 2300 milligram is a rough estimate. In many patients, it may need to be less than 1500. And in the next few slides, we'll talk about that. I also recommend taking 1500 milligrams of calcium and about 600 units of vitamin D3. If you go to any over-the-counter vitamin D3 calcium combination, they should contain this. You don't need anything expensive. This is good enough to help with your bone structure. So all patients of mine who are on prednisone, this is something I commonly recommend to be on. Next slide. People say, or the studies have said that patients who are, or people who are 2 years or older should not take anything more than 2300 milligrams of sodium. So that's less than a teaspoon a day, which is really hard. Trust me, I like salt. I come from India and I eat spicy food, and my food contains a lot of salt. All the gravies and the curries, and they are drenched with salt. So I'm used to eating high salt food, and I try eating low salt food and I can't eat. So while I'm saying this, I know how hard it is to do that. So, but it's always good to try. And I tell my patients that, you know, with MG, we had to keep trying and we can never give up. And so reducing the intake of sodium is one of those things. Next slide. On the other hand, we also have certain patient populations. We have African Americans or adults who are 51 plus, or people with different kinds of medical issues, diabetes, hypertension, kidney disease, who get MG. And in those cases, the amount of salt you take should be even reduced to less than 1500 milligrams, which is really, really hard. Because as you will see, most things we eat contain salt or sodium, which is really hard. But you have to give it a try. So where does salt come from? You know, processed food, packaged food, baking soda, cheese, sausage. I love cheese. I know it's one of my favorite things, but it has sodium. I mean, a lot of it. Eating out, I love to eat out, and you know, my wife loves cooking. On the other hand, I like eating out, so we always find a compromise on what days we eat out and what days we cook. But eating out, the prepared food has a lot of sodium. Even condiments that we use, ketchup, pickles, salad dressing, has sodium. And you always want to read the label, not just what is put in, but also the hidden part of that. And you know, an average person US consumes up to 2500 to 5000 milligrams of sodium per day. That's just an average. I can tell you, you know, some even more. So you have to be extremely careful. Read the label before you eat. Some of the easy ways, like I said, check labels. Avoid adding any salt. If you can reduce, if you can prevent eating salt, that's the best thing. Eat fresh fruit and frozen veggies. Canned has a lot of salt, as we all know. And when you go out, tell them not to add any salt or reduce salt intake. And please don't put extra helpings of salt. If you go out, you sit on the table, they have salt and pepper shaker. Keep them away. Don't look at them. And if you can have other seasonings that will reduce your salt craving, try that. And get unsalted nuts. I go to Walmart, and I was talking about food desert here. I went to one of the stores here. I said Walmart, but I went to one of the stores here. It's a local store in mid-Missouri. As soon as you enter, the first few things, the first few rows are salted peanuts, salted nuts, salted chips, salted nachos, extra spicy nachos. You go on, and all you see are these. And you know, you go till the end, and that's when you can see a small shelf of fresh veggies. And then you look at the price of them, it's extremely expensive. So I talk about food desert. You want to eat healthy, but unfortunately, some of the places where we live in, it's very hard to find healthy food. When when I used to live in India, I came to US about 15 years ago. I back before that I was in India, and we had bazaars in India. You go to any bazaar, you can find healthy fresh fruits and vegetables for a very low price. I moved to US, I moved to Florida, and I went to the local store there. I asked him, where is the fresh food section? He shows me a small corner with a few fruits and vegetables which seem old and dry. So all I could pick was salted nuts and chips and more canned food and so on. So food desert is a common thing, and we all live with it. Some areas more than other. But if you are able to find stores which can get you fresh veggies and fruits, and if you are able to afford them, that would be the best way to go. The condiments that you eat contain sodium, so pay very close attention to them. And if you can make your own seasoning which you like, which has low sodium, that's the best way to go. Next slide. The other issue with prednisone is increased amount of calories. It makes you eat more and gain weight, which in turn predisposes you to a lot of issues, including diabetes, hypertension, obesity, sleep apnea, you name it. We all know the nutritional chart from myplate.gov. Should contain vegetables, quite a bit of it, some proteins, some grains, some fruits, and very small amount of dairy there. And this is a hard model to follow, but it's a great model to follow. Next slide. For proteins, people ask me what is the best one. Meat-based proteins are good, but I would go for plant-based proteins. I'll talk more on that in the next few slides. Next slide. One of the biggest thing you want to think about while you're eating is balancing calories. I send many of my MG patients who are on prednisone to a dietitian or nutritionist so that they can help plan their diet. But if you don't have one and you don't want to see one, you can use this simple model. You can eat what you want, but remember, in MG, M stands for moderation. So you want to eat in moderation and avoid oversized portions. We have, you can go anywhere and you can get a supersized version of soda or supersized version of a burger or fries, which is okay. But with MG, moderation is the key. Balancing calories is an important part of that. Next slide. And remember, when you eat, it takes about 20 minutes for your brain to say you are full. So it's not, you may keep on eating. It takes a while for your brain to know that. So keep that in mind as you're eating. And you don't, in the past, I used to always tell, make sure you empty your plate. That's no longer true. If you eat and you start to feel that you are getting full, you don't have to eat all of your plate and you don't have to eat everything to make your stomach full. Because by the time your brain feels your stomach is full, you would have eaten 20 more minutes extra of calories. So it's okay to leave food on the plate. Next slide. And the big thing though with the prednisone while you're taking and having issues with weight and so on is to eat nutrient dense foods. And we'll talk more on what they mean. Next slide. Here's an example of nutrient dense food. You can have 2 of those cookies. I love those cookies, but you can have a lot more of strawberries and you get the same calorie and you feel your stomach feels full. So you can get 2 of those cookies, get 140 calories and your stomach is still not full and you want to eat more. Or you can get a lot more of strawberries. Your stomach feels full, but you won't have put so many calories. So that's what we mean by nutrient dense food. You get the same amount of nutrients and you get your stomach full by eating certain food as compared to others. Next slide. Here is another example. Baked chicken breast versus breading or frying. I don't eat meat, I'm a vegetarian, but my wife loves chicken. And For her, going to KFC is a highlight sometimes. So fried chicken has less calories, is less nutrient dense, adds more salt as compared to a baked one, which has more calories, less salt, and is healthier. Next slide. Same thing with beef. If you have lean ground paffy meat and 90% lean, it gives you enough calories and sustains you as compared to a beef fat, which has less, but gives you a lot more of salt and other kinds of stuff. So think about nutrient dense food when you eat, not necessarily, and many of these nutrient dense food are not the food that we eat normally. Examples of nutrient dense food include vegetables and fruits, whole grains, seafood, eggs, dry beans, unsalted nuts and seeds, lean meats and poultry. Next slide. Always remember, when you buy condiments, buy add-ons, look at the word added. Whenever they say added sugar or syrup, you need to think about adding extra sodium, extra calories. And 1 teaspoon of sugar is about 4 grams added, which is a big problem to the food we eat. And any condiments you buy, any food you buy outside, any food that you order outside, this added sugars and salt adds extra sodium, extra sodium and extra fat to your food. Next slide. There are certain foods you want to increase. Next slide. And the biggest thing I would recommend is fruits and veggies as much as possible. And it's hard, but if you're able to do that, especially with MG, I have some pictures of corn and melon here. In the previous slide, I told you it's very hard to have corn and melon. You can choke on them. And that's the hard part of balancing nutrition with MG. You have to find food that's not too dry, that's not too liquidy, that's nutrient rich, that's calorie rich without gaining weight. And that's the hardest part of MG. In the next coming slides, I will tell you what are the common food I recommend to my patients. I'll give you an example of how it can be done. Next slide. And people ask me, are carbohydrates bad? Unfortunately, carbohydrates get a very bad rap with MG and other diseases. So, but you need carbohydrates because they supply your body and your brain with energy. Fruits and veggies, if you know it or not, are also carbohydrates. And they are natural form of sugar, which is the best way to eat them. Milk and dairy have lactose, which is also a form of carbohydrates. They can also help with calcium, vitamins, and minerals, especially if you're not lactose intolerant. Next slide. And these are different ways to think about drinking milk. And especially if you're able to go to a fat-free or a soybean version or any other versions of milk, where you can reduce the amount of calories you're taking, but at the same time, they are nutrient rich and nutrient fortified. Next slide. You also need proteins, and you want to make sure that you need proteins because it helps you to heal. And eggs, fish, poultry, lean red meat are the best way to go. And if you are okay with dairy, that's also another way of adding proteins to your meat or to your food. Next slide. Eggs are a good way to add some proteins. They're easy to digest, and they contain antioxidants which help with healing. I would recommend preparing an egg with canola oil and don't use salt. Next slide. If you're able to, if you like beans and peas, they are the best protein source. And if you're able to cook them to a consistency where they're not too hard, they're just about soft and mushy, where you can put a fork and eat them and swallow them without any problem, that would be the best one. Again, remember, canned food contains salt. So the best way is to buy and boil and cook on your own without addition of extra salt. Next slide. Next slide. The biggest thing you want to really avoid is the things I have tried to show you here: excess bread, donuts, cheese, chips, chocolates, etc. I mean, these are good, they taste good, but they cause excess problems. And especially when you're having MG and you're on prednisone, these can be really, really problematic. Next slide. In the next few slides, I want to talk about gut health. And one of the things that you really want to think about in gut health is that there is a connection that people have found between your gut health and autoimmune disease. And there are lots of things that are known to trigger it. And we have found that your gut health and your gut bacteria can reduce the risk of having autoimmune disease. And if you have something called a leaky gut, it increases the risk of systemic inflammation and autoimmune disease. Some of the food you eat, such as red meat, sugar, fats, they can cause changes in your gut bacteria, make your gut more leaky, and trigger autoimmune disease. Now, there is a lot of research going on this, on how to improve gut health. You would have read about them. But we are still yet to understand how gut bacteria and your gut health plays a role in autoimmune disease, including in MG. But there is a lot coming out on it. They're also saying that gut health plays an important role in conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and so on. So stay tuned. In the next coming few years to a decade, we will learn a lot more about how to keep your gut healthy, how to preserve and protect the healthy bacteria in your gut. For one thing, we do know that these kind of high calorie food, red meat, and sugar and artificial sweeteners do affect your gut bacteria, do increase the risk of gut inflammation, and possibly can trigger autoimmune disease. Next slide. There have been multiple ways where gut health and gut bacteria are extremely useful. And the gut health of what you have, you can also pass on to your children. So you having a healthy diet, having a healthy gut and a healthy gut bacteria also plays an important role in your children having that. Again, there's a lot of research going on this, but something to keep in mind. Sometimes we talk about autoimmune diseases running in family. So a good gut health can also mean that you can pass on good gut health bacteria to your children as well and reduce the risk of autoimmune diseases. Next slide. So here's what I recommend as an autoimmune diet. Most of the things I recommend here are fairly easy to cook, fairly easy to chew and swallow. And some examples are blueberries, salmon, chia seeds, flax seeds, coconut oil, turmeric, not much of it, but some of it, some ginger, walnut, and you can eat walnut, which is unsalted, and some of the green leafy vegetables. And again, when you cook, you don't want to cook them you want to cook them to an extent where you can easily pick up from a fork and chew and swallow. If it doesn't stick on your fork, or if it's too hard to put, it's a problem. So a combination of food like beets and broccoli. So you wake up in the morning, you have some blueberry with some chia seeds in a yogurt, some turmeric to top on, would be a good healthy breakfast. As the day goes on, you want to have a healthy lunch. You can try some salmon, you can try some broccoli with that. And at the night, evening or night, if you want to have a kind of a low, you want to eat something but not too much, you can end your day off with blueberries and some yogurt. You can add some walnut as well to finish your day. So that would be the day kind of food you want to eat. A good breakfast, a decent lunch, and something at night or evening to end your day. So combination of something like chia seeds, flax seeds, some turmeric, and maybe some pineapple or blueberries with some yogurt in the morning, salmon and some broccoli in the afternoon, end your day with some walnut. This is what I typically recommend to many of my patients. It's a hard diet to follow, and sometimes even harder to find some of these ingredients. But if you're able to do this, will keep your gut healthy. It'll keep your you know, gut bacteria healthy. It will also help with your MG and control your MG symptoms. And when you're on medications like prednisone and pyridostigmine, which increase the risk of weight gain, which increase the risk of other complications, these healthy food plays a big role. Next slide. So this is the holistic care I would talk about MG. You wake up in the morning, you take your medications on time, including your pyridostigmine, you exercise, you do some breathing exercises as well. Remember, in MG, M stands for moderation. You have a good breakfast of what I discussed with you, go to work, and make sure you again take your medications on time. Have a good autoimmune lunch, salmon for example. Come home, spend time with your family, go outdoors, garden, spend time with well-wishers. Make sure you take your medications again if you need to. Do some meditation, really helps you to focus on yourself and helps you to fight your disease. And again, a light autoimmune dinner if you need to. Unwind, catch up on bill, say thank you, and I have a gratitude diary, and have a good night's sleep. If you are able to do this, if you are able to plan this and follow this, you can fight MG better. With these few slides, I want to conclude my talk, and I'm happy to answer any questions that are there.
Thank you so much for that. We have quite a few really good questions. We have a lot of great questions tonight. So the first one is, should you take calcium carbonate or citrate?
Both are fine. I'm okay with either of those. I would prefer citrate.
Is there a reason why?
Easy to absorb by your gut as compared to calcium carbonate.
Okay, thank you. This next person was having issues with sodium and then found out they had hyperaldosteronism.
Aldosteronism, yep.
Is that common for MG patients?
No. It is not a common thing, but you are right. It can be there coexisting with other things.
Okay. What does leaky gut mean?
So it's a great question. We still don't know what exactly it means, but here is the answer. Your gut wall and your gut bacteria prevent chemicals from leaking into the blood, which can trigger an autoimmune response. So basically your gut wall and your gut bacteria act as a barrier. When you eat certain foods chronically, high calorie food, red meat, these gut bacteria are altered and your gut wall is not strong enough, and these chemicals can leak in, which people think can trigger autoimmune disease.
Thank you. Okay, this next question, is there a medical reason why so many folks with MG need iron and vitamin D supplements?
Vitamin D definitely for, if you're on prednisone, as I showed you in the slide, vitamin D and calcium are necessary to maintain your bone health. I'm not sure on the iron part. Some MG patients can have anemia. When you have MG and other autoimmune diseases, you can have anemia of chronic disease. Or in some patients, you can lose blood from whatever reason, and you may need iron for that. I typically don't prescribe iron unless they have iron deficiency anemia.
Okay, this next question is, what are good for snacks? I usually have low salt crackers, almonds, or no salt pretzels. Do you have any other suggestions?
Walnuts, pretzels are pretty good, all no salted. And if they become drier, you can moisten them with a lot of things, so you can swallow them easily. Or I would suggest that, if you have taken your pyridostigmine and your chewing and swallowing is pretty good, that would be the best time to take them.
Okay. I found when I am weak, eating too many magnesium-rich foods makes me feel worse. Is there an amount that we need versus too much for an MG patient?
Right. Magnesium, as we all know, can make your muscles weak. So magnesium is one of the things that we say limit in MG. Hard to figure out which food has magnesium, which doesn't, because sometimes it may or may not be put. Less than 200 milligrams should be your goal.
Okay. This next question is, my neurologist internist says calcium goes to clog the arteries rather than build bones. Is that true?
If you take the amount that we have recommended, then it doesn't clog your arteries. If you are on prednisone, calcium and vitamin D will definitely help. You don't want to take too much of it. It has its own problems, but 500 milligrams is what we recommend.
Another question is, what kind of recommendations do you make for somebody who's newly diagnosed with MG and has to make a lot of changes to their diet? How can they take steps to make a plan that they can stick to?
It's a great question. It's a hard question to answer. Some of the things I suggested would be the way to start out with. Basically, I would recommend planning your day and your week. Also having a diary of what you are eating, when you are eating, and when you take your medications. Once you have an idea about when you take your medications and what you are eating, you can substitute some of the things you are eating. For example, if you like to eat red meat, substitute with chicken that is boiled. If you like to eat salted peanuts or walnuts, substitute with the unsalted ones. So first thing is to figure out what you have been doing, have a diary for that for a week. And once you have the diary and jot it down, then work your way to eliminate some of those and substitute ones that are good for MG patients.
Thank you. What do you suggest in place of over-the-counter diarrhea medications like Imodium?
For patients who have pyridostigmine and who are on getting diarrhea, Imodium is okay. I would not suggest anything different, but I would suggest limit it to once a day if needed at all. I would suggest to reduce the dose and change your diet rather than taking Imodium. Should be the third choice. First choice should be to reduce dose. You shouldn't need so much pyridostigmine in the first place that it's causing diarrhea. If your other MG medications are good and they're controlling your MG, you have to keep the amount of pyridostigmine you're taking to the lowest. That would be my first recommendation. Second would be to make changes to your diet, and third would be Imodium as needed very rarely.
Okay. Thank you. This next question, my neurologist told me that Pepto-Bismol is okay to take occasionally.
I agree with your neurologist. Occasionally is fine. Remember, everything in moderation.
Wonderful. Is fasting good or bad for someone with MG?
So if you're fasting with MG especially, one of the things you want to keep in mind is your sugar levels if you're on prednisone. So while fasting in some cases has shown to improve your overall health, with MG, especially if you have high sugar and you're taking medications, you have to be extremely careful because you don't want to become hypoglycemic. So I would say fasting is okay as long as your sugar levels are maintained. But if you are becoming borderline diabetic or higher, fasting is a problem.
We have one last question, and what is an appropriate amount of water consumption or goal for water consumption for an MG patient?
So at least 2 to 3 liters a day. You want to keep yourself hydrated. You don't want to become dehydrated because that can make your MG symptoms worse.
Wonderful. Thank you. that's all the questions we have for today. We wanted to say thank you so much for a very informative presentation. We see lots of comments saying how useful this information has been. And we wanted to let everyone know that we are hosting the wellness series throughout the end of September. Our next presentation will be on September 11th. So please be on the lookout for email updates and posts on our social media. I wanted to wish you all a wonderful rest of your evening and a great night. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care and stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.